Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, many different styles, and that's the reason why I always go back to this brewery, because they always release new and different things. Their interpretations of all these different styles tend to be pretty solid, so it's always nice to review them here on the channel. But the one that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I've not had from them before. It's a style that I've been getting really into again over the last 2 years, and there's been a lot more attention paid to these styles of beer now, which I think is great. So curious to see what their interpretation of it. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So let's see how we get on. For this review then, we are going to head to Eskilstuna, out to the west of Stockholm, and we're having a look at another beer from Eskilstuna Ölkultur. So this beer is simply called Pilsner. It comes in at 4.6% ABV, and I think you know what style this one is. So this beer was released here in Sweden as part of the Lokal Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget for August of 2021. And they released it along with another lager beer, which you'll see me review in a few videos' time. And actually, the last beer that I reviewed from this brewery as well, a few months back, was called Modern Lager, if I remember rightly. So yeah, we've been having quite a few lager beers from these guys. I think the next one we need to see about is maybe a Dunkel or a Schwarzbier, because I don't think we've had those particular varieties from this brewery so far. But yeah, curious to see how this one turns out. 4.6% ABV, so not too far away from the original Pilsner Urquell at 4.4% in fact. But it uses the German word Pilsner rather than Pilsen, which it would be the Czech one. So I think this one will definitely be a slightly drier and more crisp German Pilsner rather than the slightly more bready and smooth Czech Pilsen, if you like. But yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. Since this is an Eskilstuna beer as well, a massive shout out to my good friend Rickard Branting at over at Glass. Make sure you check out his channel. I enjoy watching his videos to increase my Swedish beer vocabulary, of course. Lovely guy, and you will see him on a few of my hangouts, and I'm hoping that we can do some collaboration reviews together at some point soon, but definitely check out his channel. I'll try to remember to put the link to it in the video description below. But let's crack on with this review then. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Eskilstuna Ölkultur before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. Always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is massively appreciated. So anyway, on to the brewery notes then. So Eskilstuna Ölkultur was founded by the homebrewers Arto Ukura, Kauko Lakanen, Thomas Humla, Bosse Gustafsson and Anders Olsson. But these guys met at the Swedish Homebrewing Championships, and they decided together that they wanted to give Eskilstuna a brewery once again, because it had been quite some time. But together they managed to rent a building in the town centre, and they established a beer bar which opened at Christmas back in 2003. So these guys have been on the go for quite some time. But once the bar began to do really well, they thought that they should begin to brew some beer for themselves and sell it in the bar. So in 2006 they officially founded Eskilstuna Ölkultur. So in 2008 they moved into a larger premises because they outgrew the original brewery and bar, and they were helped by an army of volunteers to get this new premises up and running. And if you look at it, it's actually this really nice old building, and they still have a sort of outline of it on the bottle there, and I do hope that I can get up to Eskilstuna at some point, visit Rickard of course, and the guys at Mulli's and Eskilstuna Ölkultur as well, do some interviews and things like that. But I do hope that I can film a little out and about video in their brew pub at some point. But when they first started up the brewery, they received their brewing equipment from China in September of 2008, and they've continued to expand the brewing capacity and the range of beers ever since. In 2018 they produced around 130,000 litres of beer, and I believe they're still producing roughly around that that same amount. But for a long time it was Anders Olsson who is the main brewer, but these days they have somebody new, and Arto Ukura is also still involved in the business side of things. I think the other original guys are still shareholders, but they're not particularly active in the company anymore. But as of August 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 185 different kinds of beer, and the best place to go and try these is of course at the brew pub itself, which I do hope I can do at some point fairly soon. But yeah, as I say, that is all I can really tell you about Eskilstuna Ölkultur for the moment. They're a very prolific brewery. They always put out different styles of beer, and I guess that's one of the things with essentially being a kind of glorified brew pub, I guess you could say. I'm not sure exactly what volume of beer they put out through Systembolaget, but pretty much through every lokal of Småskalig you will find one or maybe two beers being released from these guys, and usually every month it's a different style. So for me, this is a brew that I always like to keep an eye on. So yeah, that is it for your history section of this video. If you want to learn a little bit more about the brewery, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on with this one then and see how we get on. So if you have eagle eyes, or if you are eagle-eyed, you might notice that the beer bottles look a little bit different. So the Eskilstuna Ölkultur labels have undergone a little bit of a facelift since my last review, and it's quite nice actually. It is pretty cool. But yeah, they were a little bit more kind of old school, so this is a little bit of a kind of modernisation of them, I guess you could say. But you can see this is the symbol of the brewery down here, and like I said to you earlier, this is basically an outline of the building in which they're based. Plain gold bottle cap on this one, which I think, yeah, that is pretty standard actually. But yeah, you can see they've got a picture, an old picture of a drayman, or I don't know, it looks either a drayman or a milkman. I wasn't 100% sure when I looked at it the first time. I'm guessing that it is a beer drayman here. But yeah, it says on the side here, timeless Pilsner with different hop sorts, tastes of, well, it's telling you about the flavours. We're not going to talk about that because we're going to taste it for ourselves, but a classic from us at Eskilstuna Ölkultur. So yeah, nice, very nice. But like we said, this one is a 4.6% Pilsner beer. When they're using the word Pilsner, to me that would infer that it's a German style Pilsner. The Pilsner as a style originated from the Czech city of Pilsen. So you get a Czech Pilsen beer, which is slightly more, a little bit more yeasty, smooth, and kind of bready at the same time, whereas you get the German take on the style, which is more kind of crisp and slightly dry, if you like. Tends to be a little bit more biscuity as well. So the story behind the Pilsner beer is that it was developed in the Czech city of Pilsen, which was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time, by a Bavarian brewer. So it was developed by a German in what is now the Czech Republic, but at that time the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And that city was always kind of half Czech, half German in a sense. These people kind of lived together. It was only when the communists came in, of course, that the Germans, the German-speaking population, were kicked out, basically. But yeah, it was developed back in the, I want to say in the 1800s. If I remember right, I want to say like the 1840s. Or 1860s, I can't quite remember, but the German brewer who developed this, the Bavarian brewer, was not a very nice man, and he only lasted a couple of years in the city before he was kicked out. But the very first Pilsner beer is in fact Pilsner Urquell, or Polszenski Prastroj, as the Czechs call it. 4.4%, and I still think a very, very nice beer. One of my go-tos actually, even though I don't session beer particularly often outside of the videos. Most, 98% of the beer that I drink is consumed here in the videos or on the live streams, of course. But yeah, that is your story of the Pilsner beer. These, of course, are lager beers, which by definition are bottom fermenting yeasts, low temperature fermentation. In other words, the fermentation takes place between 8 to 12 degrees. Ales, top fermenting yeasts between 15 to 18 degrees normally. So there's your history of the Pilsner, and to explain exactly what a lager beer is. But Pilsners are a type of lager beer. But yeah, let's get this guy out then and we'll get on with the tasting. 330 milliliter bottle. I think I paid either 25 or 30 Swedish kroner for this one. I'm not 100% sure. 25 sticks in my memory, because I think the other one, which is slightly higher in alcohol and hops, was 30 kroner. So yeah, 25 Swedish kroner. That is about €2.50. Just slightly over £2 sterling, and I guess somewhere in the region of about $3 American for those of you watching over there. But yeah, It's still a good price. For Swedish prices, can't really go wrong with 25 kroners for a craft Pilsner if you like. But yeah, let's just line that up so that my OCD is happy. But anyway, so before the head disappears on this one, you can see that it's poured with just under a half finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head. That is fading away to be a very kind of thin foamy layer now, but it's going to leave a nice little bit of a ring around the edge of the glass. If we shine the light through this beer, it is pretty much crystal clear, and it's a lovely kind of pale golden straw colour, I guess we could say. So one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there, but as we say, the head has just faded away to be a very thin kind of foamy layer. But lovely crystal clarity to this one, which I think is great. So yeah, lovely stuff, this one, but certainly nothing out of the ordinary in terms of appearance with this beer when you consider what style it is. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use, 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any adjuncts that you put in any barrel aging that you do will also play a role in that, but we don't have to care about that normally, at least when it comes to Pilsners, and certainly not in this case. This one, I think, is brewed to be an authentic take on the German style Pilsner. But yeah, nothing else we really need to say about the appearance of this one. It is as you would expect for the style. So let's take a closer look at the aroma then and see how we go. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's pretty authentic. Yeah, and you can kind of smell the sort of crispness and things like that, and from the hoppy characters in this beer as well. I'm pretty sure this one is a German, it is a German Pilsner rather than a Czech Pilsen. There are, as we say, some people might argue there's not much of a difference, but I think there are very slight differences between the two variants, if you like. But yeah, for me, first thing is you can smell a little bit of the crispness and the slight dryness out of this beer. The hops come across as quite bright, but at the same time quite smooth. And for me, that's an indicator of the German, like Hallertau and Tettnanger hops, rather than the Czech Sats, which tend to be a wee bit more spicy. But yeah, for me, that would be the key indicator. But yeah, aroma-wise, this one is really authentic. And as I've mentioned in countless Pilsner reviews before, that's what I mark these beers on. I don't expect these things to do crazy, do crazy, unusual things. I want them to be close to what you would actually get in Germany or the Czech Republic itself. But yeah, aroma-wise, this one is pretty damn authentic, and this is what we've come to expect from this brewery, to be honest. These guys are really solid when it comes to getting the authenticity out of these beers. I've only ever had one or two that haven't, quite got it full on, but this one I think is going to be one of the ones that's bang on the money. But yeah, straight away with this beer then, you can smell that nice sort of crackery backbone to this one. For me, it's a sort of Jacob's cream cracker that you get out of this one. Not sure how good a reference that is for Swedish people. I actually can't remember if you get Jacob's cream crackers over here, but it's certainly got a little bit of that kind of crackery note to the back of it. You certainly get a wee bit of an almost bread crusty quality in there. And in fairness, when you take the aroma in a little bit more deeply, you can get a lovely sort of smooth white bready character out of this one. But yeah, nice crisp Jacob's cream crackery element to it, a little bit of a smooth white bready character in there as well, and some kind of some sort of biscuit, some kind of bread crusty elements in there as well. So I really do like how that goes together in this one. So yeah, the aroma out of this beer was it is pretty nice on the malty side of things. It's got kind of everything you'd want. You can definitely smell that nice kind of crisp Pilsner malt in there. That one, I think it's pretty sure it would be German Pilsner malt that's in this. These guys, as I say, I'm pretty sure they always go for the kind of the authentic ones, if you like. So they'll be bringing this malt up from Germany. You can get Pilsner malt from the likes of Viking Brewery Viking Maltery, sorry, here in Sweden, but you certainly get a nice kind of crisp dryness out of this. And as I've explained in other Pilsner reviews, I find that Pilsner malt is really difficult to describe because it's really more about the vibe that it gives the beer, and the Pilsner malt in this gives it a really lovely kind of dryness actually, and you can just smell that crisp note out of it. So yeah, on top of the white bready notes, there's certainly a nice little bit of kind of crispness in there. But yeah, on top of that, you've certainly got a nice little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive kind of biscuity note to this one. So you get a wee tiny touch of a honey's not the right word, but you get that sort of syrupy, McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing in there, and I really like how that goes together in this one. So a big thumbs up to them on the malt base of this. This one is pretty damn authentic, as we say. So yeah, and you can, as I say, if this was a Czech Pilsen, you would get a bit more breadiness out of it, I think, and it would just feel a little bit smoother in a sense, but you can really smell the slightly stronger German crisp note in this one, and a wee bit of the more biscuity character as well. The sort of biscuity note that you get in the Czech Pilsen is a bit more oily, if you like, whereas in the German Pilsner, I've always found it's a wee bit more kind of grainy, if you like, too. But yeah, aroma-wise, this one has everything that you would expect of the malt base in there. You can smell a wee bit of the yeastiness in the back of the nose as well. But malty and yeasty-wise, this one is bang on the money for a German Pilsner. Lovely stuff. On the hoppy side of things then, yeah, hoppy-wise, again, it's these typical notes that you'll get of Hallertau and Tettnanger, although I do wonder, I've been having a few beers recently with Sapphire in them, and the floral character is just a little bit different. It's almost just got this wee bit of kind of, deeper, slightly danky kind of note to it. So I do wonder if there's a wee bit of Sapphire in this one. Could be wrong, of course, but yeah, I think there is a wee touch of maybe that in here. There's quite a few different German hops, of course. You've got the Hallertaus and the Tettnangers. Those are the two main producing regions. Hallertau in Bavaria, Tettnang over in Baden-Württemberg, and then you've got slightly higher alpha acid hops. Pearl. You've got Pearl, Hercules. There's other ones that aren't coming to mind just now. You've got Hallertau Blanc as well, which is a beautiful, beautiful hop, incidentally. Mandarin of Bavaria is another fruity one. But yeah, Sapphire is slightly lower alpha acid actually, but it just gives you a wee tiny bit of a slightly deeper floral note, and you can pick that out of this one. But yeah, you've got a lovely, quite smooth earthiness in there. You can smell a wee teeny bit of a herbal quality, but then you've got that big, bright floral note to it, which for me is the characteristic of the German noble hops. The Slovenian ones tend to be more smooth, the Czech ones tend to be a bit more spicy, but the German ones are quite bright. But on the front of the nose with this one, you get a little bit of a kind of grassy zestiness in there, and again, the slightly deeper floral note and the grassy, the kind of power behind the grassy zestiness that this beer has makes me wonder, maybe Sapphire. So that's interesting for sure. It could be a bit of pearl or whatever. And the more that I'm smelling this beer, incidentally, I do get a wee bit more sweetness out of the biscuity side of it. But on the fruity side of things, it is kind of what you would expect. So for me, there's a wee bit of a kind of sultana type quality to it. You have that dried sultana note, little touches of apricot, but then you get that oily peary note and maybe just a wee teeny hint of an orangey quality, which again makes me wonder about Sapphire. So yeah, I do like how the aroma in this one goes together. There's a wee touch of behind the just grassy note in there. You do get just a wee teeny hint of a slightly limey note as well, or a spicy apple, a bit of lime spicy apple in there. And these are all things that you can expect from this style of beer, of course. But yeah, take a bit of time to ponder over the aroma of this one before you get stuck into it. I always get excited with these beers, so this has been a longer aroma note, but I think we should get stuck into this one now. So yeah, this one is the Eskilstuna Pilsner, 4.6% ABV from Eskilstuna Ölkultur in Eskilstuna, out to the west of Stockholm. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skull, cheers. Oh yeah, that is pretty damn nice actually. A little bit sweeter I thought it was going to be. You do get quite a nice. The one thing I'll say on first impression with this beer, it does get a little bit more oily and you get more and more of that biscuity note, but then you can feel the dryness, the crispness just pushing its way through. This is interesting, but I will say it is pretty authentic in German for sure. So thumbs up to Eskilstuna for this. This is pretty damn solid actually. So, yeah, where do we start with this? It really is very nicely done. So yeah, it's bang on the money once again. As I say, this is what I expect of Eskilstuna Ölkultur. I do hold these guys to quite high standards, if you like, with their takes on these authentic beers, just because of what we've had before. But yeah, straight away then, across the middle and the back third of your palate, you can feel that lovely kind of crackery backbone there, and you get that kind of dry German Pilsner malty quality. You get that nice dry crispness mixing in with that. You can feel in the middle third of your palate, on top of that, you certainly get a little bit of a sort of wet, white bready character in there, and at either end of that middle third of your palate too, you can feel a slightly stronger graininess from the bread crust. There's perhaps just a wee slight touch of a wholemealy brown bread sitting in there as well, actually, on top of the kind of wetter white bready note too. So yeah, that's quite interesting, this one. That is the backbone of the beer, the sort of crackery note in there, the crackery note, the sort of crispness from the Pilsner malt, bit of wet white bread, and then a layer of a kind of layer of a layer of a more, how do we say, a layer of a more kind of just slightly brown bready, wholemealy bread kind of quality. So that's interesting in this beer for sure. Yeah. And yeah, sitting on top of that, of course, you get the kind of oily circle, if you like, that I often talk about in Pilsner. So on top of that kind of brown bready layer, right in the middle of the third of your palate, you can feel that nice kind of oily, slightly brown sugary circle there. So the backbone of this is it tastes like McVitie's digestive, basically. In the dead centre of that, you can feel it's quite concentrated. You can get that really concentrated, oily, biscuity thing that comes out of this one. And as you move further out from that, it certainly gets a wee bit more. It gets a little bit more kind of grainy, if you like, and you start to get more of the kind of grainy elements of the McVitie's digestive biscuit out of it. So I really like how that goes together in this beer, that's for sure. So yeah, I would say that the further you go into the aftertaste, you can feel the sort of oily character just rolls a little bit, and it just makes all of the beer that little bit more kind of sweeter in a sense, and it really starts to lean towards that kind of oily McVitie's digestive biscuity quality the further you go into the aftertaste. If you go to the dead centre of your palate then and just move towards the back of that middle third of your palate, you can feel a wee bit of the dryness of the kind of Pilsner malt pushing its way up through that, of course. But like I say, it's just the oiliness in that middle third of your palate just rolls its way out towards the edges of the tongue there. So I really like how that goes together in this one. So yeah, the malty middle third of your palate on this one is quite nice. Well, I should say it's very well done and very authentic, but certainly one of the more oily German Pilsners that I've come across. But it does have the dryness to it that you expect of the German. Can we call it a sub-style? I don't know, but the German Pilsner rather than the Czech Pilsen, which would be, smoother and breadier, if you like. But yeah, I think that covers the middle third of your palate, other than to say there's maybe one or two little woody notes push their way out of this one. But yeah, onto the back third of your palate then. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again you get a wee bit of a bready build up there. You can feel a slightly more intense bread crust, but the back third of your palate has the same base. It's got the kind of crackery, the Jacob's cream crackery notes in there, a bit of the kind of Pilsner malty crispness. You do get a wee bit more graininess towards the very back of the palate though, a little bit of a wet white bread, and then a more kind of wholemealy brown bread note sitting on top of that. But then on top of that layer, you've also got more of a, you get a little bit more of a, you get more of a kind of airy yeasty note out of this one. So that is quite interesting, in fact. So I do like the kind of slightly more airy yeasty note that this one has, and it is a wee bit of a mix between that sort of wet white bread and slightly brown wholemealy bready kind of thing. But when you start at the back of the palate, you can feel the flavour of this one just condenses down a little bit. Then as you move into that middle third of your palate, the flavours are just a wee bit more squashed together. But these things you would expect from many, many beers. So yeah, I like that about this one. So thumbs up to them on the malty and yeasty side of this one. Let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer then. So back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there, and as you move further forward it does develop a little bit more of a herbal quality, but then quite quickly it becomes a lot more sort of floral and aromatic, and then you've got a really nice big kind of floral aromaticity out of this one. But as you reach the front corners of the palate, underneath it's got a little bit more of a, it certainly has a little bit more of a kind of could we say like a little bit of a kind of more, it's almost got a slight touch of dankiness to it, and again this makes me wonder if it's perhaps got a wee bit of sapphire in it, so that's always a good thing. Sapphire is quite an interesting hop. But yeah, around the front curve of your tongue you can feel a nice lighter grassy element out of this one, and you can feel the grassiness does have a wee touch of a zesty character to it, and again that's potentially an indicator of sapphire for me. So I think maybe a little bit of pearl or something like this, like a slightly higher alpha acid hop along with a little bit of sapphire. I think there might be 2 hops in this one actually. So otherwise it could have a wee touch of something American in it, but maybe even Mandarina Bavaria, because it does have a wee orangey hint to it. But on that note, let's focus on the fruity part of the beer, the front third of your tongue. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a bready build up in there, wee bit of a kind of bread crusty kind of thing, but the base of that front third of your palate is certainly a bit of that wet white bready and brown bready kind of note. So yeah, I do like how that sort of bready note kind of comes out in this one, and you do actually, in fairness, you do get a wee bit of the kind of biscuity sweetness coming out in the front third of your palate as well, which is quite interesting. I will say that about this beer for sure, but the fruity side of this beer is quite nice, and it actually starts to lean. It's got a good balance between kind of dry fruit and the kind of more oily fruits the further that you go into it. But let's focus on that then. So back half of that front third of your palate, you can feel a little touch of apricot in there forming the base layer. Then you get a wee bit of a more kind of sultana note out of this one, like a dried white green grapey character. You certainly get that on the back half of that front third of your palate. But as you move further forward, you get a little bit more of a you can feel the slightly more citrusy notes coming out of this one. So as you move further forward, you can feel that underneath you get a little bit of a kind of almost like spicy apple sort of thing to this one. And maybe just behind the very front tip of the tongue you get a wee bit of lime, but on top of that I think there's a slightly oily kind of peary note to this beer. So, and I do get just a wee tiny hint of orange, which again for me is a little bit of sapphire potentially. So yeah, interesting front part, like sort of spicy apple underneath, an oily pear in the middle, then a wee bit of a more oily orangey note on the front, and then a wee bit of lime just behind the very front tip of the palate. So yeah, I like how this beer goes about its business. It's a bit different from the other Pilsners that I've had, but it certainly does the job and gives a nice take on the style. So we've come to expect this from Eskilstuna Ölkultur, and they haven't let themselves down here. So yeah, I think that kind of rounds off the tasting section for this one anyway. It was another nicely done beer. But on the mouthfeel then, just to round off the review, I would say that this beer, it is light bodied of course, but it's maybe pushing towards the top end of light bodied. The carbonation has a lovely crispness to it, it's got a lovely kind of slick mouthfeel to it, and it's certainly one of the more oily Pilsners that I've had in recent times, but it still has the crispness to make it a German Pilsner rather than a Czech Pilsen, absolutely. So in terms of hoppy bitterness, I think this is a fairly standard, 20-25 IBUs, no doubt in my mind about that. It does have a nice wee bit of bitterness there that lingers into the aftertaste. The malt base, as we said, is quite smooth. It's got a bit of crispness to it and a bit of sweetness, but I think it gets sweeter and slightly more oily the further you go into the aftertaste. The fruity notes in this one are of course slightly oily and quite slick as well, but you do get enough of a little bit of sweetness out of them as well. So yeah, overall a really nice take, and as I say, it certainly plants its flag firmly in the German side of the Pilsner Pilsen side of things. But yeah, it's a really nice take on this one. I would love to see them do one that's called Pilsen with the Czech, with a more Czech leaning recipe. I think that could be an interesting review, and maybe even a side by side of those two. would make for an interesting video too. Who knows? Maybe that would be possible at some point. But yeah, I think this beer is really nicely done. And as I say, this brewery for me, I love checking these out the new releases from these guys because they always do these more traditional beers, and they've not let themselves down with this one. They've kept the same standards as we've always had. But my first Pilsner from them, and it certainly doesn't disappoint. In fact, my only complaint about it would be that it's a 330, but you guys know I always moan about that when we get lager beers in 330s. For me, lager beers should be in 440 cans or 500s, but these guys are very small, so we kind of have to let them away with that. We can't gripe them too much for that. But yeah, I think that's a good place to kind of round off this review. Very nicely done Pilsner, so well done to Eskilstuna Ölkultur once again. But yeah, at that, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Eskilstuna Ölkultur as well. Like I said, I do have another lager beer from these guys to review, which you'll see in a couple of videos time, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But like I say, I would love to see a Dunkel from these guys, and also a Dunkel Schwarz beer. And you know, if they did the Czech variants of these as well, you know, the Svetlis, the late Saxon stuff. I don't think we've had a Vienna lager from them either, come to think of it. And they are pretty damn solid in the lagers. Being good at lager beers is the sign of a technically good brewery. So these guys know what they're doing in that sense, actually. But yeah, lovely stuff. So if you like the Pilsner from like Benchwarmers or the Skånsk Lager from Hylia Brewery down here in Skåne, you will enjoy this one. And as I say, if you want to try classic styles, Eskilstuna Ölkultur are one of the breweries that you want to check out. But let's leave it there. Thank you again for watching my reviews. As I say, let me know all your thoughts on this beer and the brewery's beers in the comment section below. Check out my social media, check out their social media, and this one is all done. So this was the Eskilstuna Pilsner, 4.6% ABV from Eskilstuna Ölkultur in Eskilstuna out to the west of Stockholm. Make sure you check out Ricard at over at Glass from Eskilstuna too. Slange, skull, cheers, and see you guys in the next review.